Welcome to Church Girlz Chatz. My name is Jasmine Ford, and I'm the president and founder of Church Girlz Incorporated. This week I wrote an article about how oftentimes we find ourselves in relationships where we never consulted God, and then we're hurt and disappointed by the results that came from that relationship, and sometimes it makes us even question our worth. I concluded the article explaining the prisons we find ourselves in after a bad relationship and how we have the keys to get out. So today I want to talk about one of those keys, and that key is responsibility, owning the decisions that we made. Oftentimes as women, it's easy for us to just blame the guy. We're able to, a lot of times, it's stereotypical that he did something for the relationship to end. Like, especially if it was unhealthy, we're able to say, oh, he cheated, he lied, he abused, he did all these different things. And so it's easy just to point the blame because there's an isolated issue that we're able just to say, you did this, where it doesn't matter if he cheated, lied, abused, or whatever he did. We had a part to play in it. We had a part. And so I want to talk about that, of owning that, because if we don't own that, we're not able to truly heal. So the very first thing we need to own is that we weren't whole when we met him. And if you're not whole, you're broken. And that's a hard pill to swallow. That's really hard to say, is that I was broken. I am broken. That's hard to say. So we have to stop and think, why was I even attracted to him? Why was he attracted to me? It's not just merely, oh, they looked good. It wasn't just merely he's funny. That's part of it, but things are deeper than this. There's a spiritual world out here, and we're spirit beings. Something spiritually attracted us to him a lot of times. And a lot of times, it wasn't something good. We're a broken humanity. We're broken. And we're not whole unless we seek that wholeness through Jesus. So if you're questioning, was I whole? No. If you know if you're whole and you sought that out purposely, if you're whole, there's so many things that can make us be attracted to a person and them attracted to us. And that's what we have to own. And it can feel like, well, I didn't know. Some of us didn't know. There's some of us who did know. There's from the time we shook his hand, you knew, you got that gut check from God, and it's just like, you don't need to talk to him, and you did it anyway. And there's some of us who didn't know. It's like, I never even knew wholeness was a thing. I didn't know that I could make better decisions because of my relationship with God. And in Luke chapter 12, verse 47, it says, and a servant who knows what the master wants, but isn't prepared and doesn't carry out those instructions will be severely punished. And that's for those of us who sat here and we knew we shouldn't have been talking to him, and we did it anyway. So you'll be severely punished. And let me get this straight. I want you to know that God's not punishing you. God's trying to protect you so you don't have to have the word punish can be replaced with like consequence. There's a consequence to pay. And it's like a parent. Parents tell their kids, don't run in the road. Why? Because we don't want them to get hurt or hit by a car. If the child does it anyway and the child gets hit by a car, the parent didn't cause the car to hit them because they didn't listen. That's the consequence, but the parent was just trying to protect the child. That's the same thing with God. He's not punishing us for not listening. He's trying to protect us because he knows that if we don't do what he tells us to do, there's a natural consequence and we'll hurt ourselves, like that kid who hurts himself who runs in the road. So I want to make that straight when I use the word punish in this scripture, that it doesn't mean he's punishing us. And then in verse 48, it says, but someone who does not know and then does something wrong will be punished only lightly. So if you're doing it out of true ignorance and you just totally didn't know, there's still consequence. It's just not as severe as you just being just blatantly disobedient. But there's always a consequence. And that's the first thing we need to own, is that I wasn't whole. When I had left, an old relationship, and it was hard, when you're with someone for years, some of us been months, years, whatever the case is, that's your experience and it hurts. First thing I sat down with God and said, okay, I have to do something different. Like, it's time to get over this thing. It's time to move on. It's time to see things differently because I don't want to live this way. And one of the first things God showed me was, who were you when you met him? What made you attracted to him? And that was hard for me to swallow. Like, was I insecure? Or was it a fear? Or was it some kind of weird spiritual connection from hello that I didn't know like gravitated me towards him? It could be all of the above, and that was hard to sit there with, especially when you met a person, it's like they're the best person, and sometimes they're not bad people. Like I said, You're not whole. You're broken. They're broken. You know how they say hurt people hurt people? A lot of times that's the case in our relationships. We're hurt and wasn't healed. And it might not be directly to a relationship. It could be something from the past, your parents, all kinds of different things that can make you broken and choose someone out of that. So that's the first thing. We weren't whole. Number 2, we stayed too long. And then we began to deceive ourselves to thinking it was going to change. I'm guilty of it. Stayed way too long. And I say we need to own that, because as women we do that a lot because we invested so much time. We're scared to be single again. We're a little embarrassed that we broke up, and it's like I just sat here and shouted to the rooftops that he was the best person since sliced bread, and we don't want to leave. And my philosophy is anything he did at the point where you knew you shouldn't be with him anymore, you can't even be mad at him no more. If he cheated again, if you cheat after 10 times, you can't be mad. He showed you who he was. My older sister always says that. If someone showed you who they are, believe them. Like, he's showing you who he is, believe him. And a lot of times we don't. And we wait till it gets super bad. We wait till it gets very toxic and healthy before we decide to make a move, before we decide we have to go. No, when he shows you that little slither and that red flag goes up, I'm not saying you got to jet at that point. You got to seek God. But he's beginning to show us. So if we stay past that, how are you still blaming him? He sat here and said, listen, this is me. And we sat there and said, I'm going to stay because he might change. I'm going to stay because things might get better. And the thing is, what we're really doing is seeking that initial high. That high, that, when you first meet somebody, it's like, you're head over heels, like from day one. And you're constantly seeking that high again in those, especially unhealthy relationships. Like, we know people who do drugs. Why do they get strung out? A lot of times, they're seeking that first initial high. And for us, it's not like, we want to get back to what you used to do. It's really seeking that high, that insecurity love, that brokenness love that it filled. And we're looking for it to feel it the way it did in day one. That's all we're looking for. It's not about back to, you used to do this and you used to do that. That's the case sometimes. Or it's not about, I like that feeling when we first met. They say some people are in love with the honeymoon phase of relationships. No, what it is that honeymoon phase give them such a high, and it feeds that brokenness so much, and you're always seeking it. And that's a lot of times why we stay. We're looking for that initial high again. And to fix that, you be whole. So we need to be whole and own that we weren't. And we need to admit that we stayed too long. So why are we upset with him? And the last one I say is simply, we just weren't spirit-led. And that's just very to the point. We weren't spirit-led. In Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do and he'll show you which path to take. I live by this scripture because I made a decision a long time ago that I don't trust myself. I don't know. It says, trust in the Lord. It says, do not lean on your own understanding. So we need to humble ourselves to say, I don't know. I don't know which job to take. I don't know which way to drive home. I really don't know which guy to pick. What makes you think you know how to pick the right guy? And sometimes we can say, I'm going to take a break from dating. And as women, we'll take a little date and have fun with our friends and live the single life and think, okay, I've done external things to have a healthy relationship with myself, so I can go date again. No, you're going to pick up where you left off. You're going to choose someone wrong again. Just because you took a break doesn't mean anything. What did you do in that break is the question. If you didn't grow and become whole, you're going to choose someone wrong again. It don't matter how long your dating break was. And so we have to seek God on this. And that's the one area we have a hard time doing. We can seek God maybe with our finances. We'll give it to him. Our purpose. God, what's my purpose? We'll give it to him. But when it comes to our love life, we're trying to hold on to that with everything we have because we're afraid God won't bring them. We're afraid that God it's going to send us that corny guy, or we're not going to be attracted to him. And that's not true, first of all. That is not true. And if you're thinking that, you'll never give it to him. You won't trust them, and therefore you'll keep being in those same situations. You'll either stay single or you'll never pick up the pieces to heal so that you can move on and be whole. You're just not going to if you don't trust God. And so that's the biggest thing. It says trust in the Lord. We have to trust him. And how do we trust him? By building a relationship with him, by spending time with him. And that's something we must do. That's the only way we will trust him. So we have to seek his will first and foremost. So we need to educate ourselves on, on relationships, on marriage. And once we understand that, we can begin to allow him to do it for us. We didn't seek God, and that's just the bottom line. It won't end well. If God didn't start something, if he's not in it from the beginning, and he's not the foundation for it, and I don't mean you're in a bad relationship and just trying to pray together. No, if God did not set you up, it is going to fall at some point, and that's anything. That's really anything. At some point, you will come to a head, especially in relationships. So those are the 3 things that we can begin to own right now. Whether you're in a relationship, you were in a relationship and you haven't totally got over the hurt and the pain and disappointment from that relationship. And be honest with yourself. Sit there with God and say, God, where do I start? And you can start with these 3 things. God, I wasn't whole. I'm broken and I need you to make me whole. And go on that journey with him. Go ahead and admit I may have stayed too long. Not everybody stayed long, but some of us stayed too long. I know I stayed too long. And then the last one is I just didn't seek God. I didn't say, God, is this right? Because he will tell us no. And when it's the right one, God will tell us yes as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope this was beneficial. And I'll see you guys next week on the new segment of Church Girls Chats.